Welcome to another Facehammer Worldwide interview, and we are joined by the excellent Darren Watson, the master of disaster himself, the meta-defining
some might say
list creator madman that is Darren Watson.
Some might say the best dancer on the tournament scene. Some might say the second best dancer on the tournament scene. Depends on you.
We love a two-step.
I can definitely confirm or deny that he has the best nipples on the tournament scene. Shaped like Element Games logos. So I think before we get into our discussion, I just want, if you would just give us a little bit of background information about who you are, what you do in the hobby, a little bit about your sort of list and stuff and your approach, and then we can get into some questions.
Sure.
Cool.
I've been wargaming since I was about 13, I think. I came across a leaflet in school and it had loads of squigs and the Night Goblin squig herders. And I was obsessed by those. So I went down to my local Games Workshop that weekend, and Bob was the manager at the time. He looked like a fat, rounder Mario.
Amazing.
And he basically bullied me into buying a Chaos Dwarf Taurus. So, like,
sounds a lot like some squig herders.
Yeah, exactly. So I ended up with like models that I probably couldn't use. I'd never used super glue before, but I took it home and cocked it up, went back in, bought some squigs, and then I remember the painting lesson that he gave me. He told me that I'd done really well. It's the best squig he'd ever seen. And upon reflection, that was just terrible salesmanship, wasn't it? He was just taking advantage of me because I bought everything he recommended. But I've been playing Warhammer ever since. I used to be able to play it all, fantasy, 40k, Necromunda, but now I can't hold all those various games in my head. I just play Age of Sigmar nowadays.
Yeah.
I played fantasy sort of all the way up until it died, and I never really hit the tournament scene too big, but I used to play in local tournaments like the South Coast GT that you ran, and I used to do reasonably well there, I think. My girlfriend's just... Are you leaving? Right. Bye, Alex.
Right. Bye.
Bye, Alex.
Have a good day.
That's enough nerd shit. Bye, Alex. Cheerio.
I really loved tournament play, but I didn't really sort of take it too seriously. And then I rage quit when fantasy ended. I was one of those idiots, And people like yourselves, you kept the flame burning, didn't you? Thank God.
Wow. And then, there was a wobble, wasn't there, Russ?
It was a flickering flame.
No, I but I mean, like when AOS come out, I mean, they started off with the set and stuff, but yeah, I mean, obviously, change is always difficult, but I think we already had the Clash of Swords booked as the first AOS event, and collaborated with Mo on the Mo comp and stuff, and then took that forward for South Coast GT, and really the main impetus for me for keeping burning the torch for AOS was just because I wanted the South Coast GT to continue. That was the...
Oh, well. Thank you for that.
So I wanted to keep the community alive, wanted to keep the tournament scene alive and keep everyone in it that was in it. But
yeah.
Well, I missed out on those crazy years, which is a real shame because I think, looking back, I'd have loved it, wouldn't I?
Oh, you would.
Mate, the Wild West was a beautiful time.
Yeah.
Just like the end times was a beautiful time.
Yeah, I did take part in the last tournament at Games Workshop HQ for the end times. Sorry, my dogs are going mental.
No, don't worry about it.
And we took it right. So it was an end times tournament, advertised as an end times tournament. Me and my friend Russ, it was doubles. We took 5 models. We took Archaon, Tyrion, Marathi, the Chaos Zinch Lord that was on a disc that had a free up ward save, and a wizard and an eagle. And we got 12,000 victory points. It was amazing.
Did he come like 70th?
Yeah, because basically at the end, because we're taking this horrible, you were supposed to be able to challenge people right at the end, and the people that won it, they just challenged their mates and beasted their mates, and because we've been so horrible to everyone, they just gave us a Games Workshop employee for our last game. Because obviously we were ruining everyone's fun. But it was the end times. When are you going to see Archaon and Marathi and Tyrion all in the same game, right? You should. Yeah. That's what it should be. Exactly. But anyway, they were cowards. They wouldn't fight us, the people that won it. So that was my last experience of Warhammer, and then obviously Age of Sigmar came along, and I spent 18 months, pissing and moaning about the change, and then the Bruces convinced me to get back into it. And my first game of Age of Sigmar was I was using Wood Elves versus Dwarves. And I remember the first thing my mate Wayne did to me was flame cannon me with 2 flame cannons. I thought, this is rubbish!
Mate, I got Tomb Kinged by Russ in my first game of fucking Age of Sigmar. It made me not want to play.
It's like
2 different Russes, eh?
It was like
played
2
it,
editions.
like Tomb Kinged me.
Malekith getting shot by skeleton bowmen. Get off the table.
It just made me not want to play anymore. I mean, generally I don't want to play Russ anyway, but most of the time it's that really hammered it home. Nightmare. But I think the first time I remember meeting you, Darren, I'm not sure if I met you in 8th edition, but I can definitely remember meeting you at that first, I think it was Warlords, the GW AOS event, and you took Sylvaneth, didn't you? And you were doing really well with them, I think.
Yeah,
was like, because
me and Darren played, so that was...
Yeah, that was my first competitive event. I ended up taking 18 Kurnoth Hunters at the time. Yeah. And I think I took Dreicher, which people weren't using, and a Treeman Ancient. Treeman Ancient was quite good because you could get 2 up.
2 up ones. Nod Warrior, Oaken Armor.
Yeah. And also at that event, I played Liam Cook, who proudly told me at the beginning he was the UK's best Sylvaneth player. And then all I did was shoot a great deal. And I played terribly, but my army was bonkers because it had 15 Kurnoth Hunters in it. So I managed to get a win there. But only a minor win, though. He played much better than me. I just sat there and shot him. And then I ended up playing the UK Master at the time. And I played terribly, but the mission was in my favour, wasn't it? And you had a beautiful corn army, and I could just shoot it. So I managed to get, and I didn't realise you were the Master at the time. So that's probably just as well. I didn't realise I could have been telling everyone.
Yeah, that's why I didn't tell you.
Master.
I said, if I would have beat you, I would have said, don't feel bad, I'm the Master, but if you beat me, I'm not going to tell you because you're going to lord it. So,
nothing to win, everything to lose.
Yeah, exactly.
To your credit, you didn't mention it. And then I ended up having to play Ben Curry. So I had quite a rough ride through that tournament, to be fair. I think I came 7th. I'll tell you, do you want to hear my story about playing Ben Curry?
Mm-hmm. Go on.
I'm not sure if you want to hear this, but I'm going to tell it anyway.
Only if it's radio friendly.
It's reasonably radio friendly. Right. So I like a drink before tournaments. I like Friday night, and if I can do it, Saturday night. So I'm quite often in a bad place, let's say, in the mornings.
Inebriated.
Yeah. Well, you start off quite well because you're still drunk, and then throughout the day you get worse and worse.
You were in an absolute state when you played me.
You
were recovering. Like you were like, I think when you played me, you were still a little bit drunk, and you were coming out of it. And then Carrie got the full experience.
When you wake up drunk and then you've got to live every part of your hangover, that's not good. Now imagine trying to play 3 hours of Warhammer. It's just
against Ben Curry as well.
I mean, he was gorgeous, bless him. But I shook his hand, said hello, and I went, right, I'm sorry, I'm feeling a bit ill. I need to go to the loo. So I rushed off to the toilet. As I bent down to sit on the toilet, I sneezed, and that made me piss violently all over my own pants. and then the smell of that made me
vomit.
I'm not going to say it, obviously. So basically,
you censored that bit, but the bit before was fine.
It's like I pissed all over my pants, but
I had the worst time I've ever had. It was probably the lowest moment in my life. And then obviously I still had to continue on doing what I was there to do. So then basically the whole point of this is then I had to go back and play Ben Curry, and I had pissy pants the entire time. It was awful. It was awful. But you see, even in that game though, my army was so bonkers. He was using that horrible Stormcast army that came down and just killed everything. And
that was
and
when you
even
did
then,
combat, wasn't it? Warrior Brotherhood.
yeah, that's it. And even then, my army was purposely designed to be just sit there and shoot. And even then, I was almost in it. And you can see his Twitter feed. It's just like, I'm losing horribly, I'm losing horribly, I'm losing horribly. I was running out of batteries throughout that game. And at the end, he wins because he did a couple of cheeky things. To be fair, that was my 5th competitive game of Age of Sigmar, so I don't feel too bad about it. But there is a point to this story.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, we get into the...
That whole event is my first sort of foray into, making sure that my list is good enough for an event. Because I had a couple of games leading up to it, but I didn't want to go to an event and spend all that money and all that time and not do very well.
Yeah.
I knew I wasn't a particularly good Age of Sigmar player. I needed a list that I knew I could sit down and if it all went pear-shaped, I could still rely on it. And at the time, Kurnoth Hunters were the most point-for-point, probably the most point-for-point best unit in the game, right? So I just took 18 of them. And it doesn't sound like, there's nothing genius about it, but I think it highlights that I knew I wasn't particularly good, so I needed to use a list strength to get me, because I wanted to be successful. I think you've got to want to be successful, and you've got to know your own limits.
Yeah.
And I don't think you have to be very good at Warhammer to be successful at it, if that makes sense. Because I'm a living example of that. I don't think I'm particularly mechanically very good at Age of Sigmar. But what I am very good at is is being prepared, accepting my limits, knowing what they are, knowing what my strengths are, and applying that to the lists that I take. And then when you combine that with a pretty good knowledge of the meta or what you're expecting to see, based on paying a lot of attention to what's going on in the world, then that's probably why I've been reasonably successful, I think. Is that okay? I hate it in my own horn.
No, you should do it more, Darren. But basically what you're saying is that you're kind of prepped. Your prep going into an event is almost more of your game than when you get to the table.
100%. Yeah, I think I probably do 90% of my work off table, and then 10% of it is. I mean, I will create little maps of my deployments. I will get my models out on the table, and I will do my mock first turns so that I know where I'm going to be. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
and I'll do that anyway. Like that is, I mean, that's a level of. I don't know if I'm too obsessed by doing that, but that's what I really enjoy.
We're not here on the weekend talking about Warhammer for like 72 hours because none of us are obsessive. So we're good, dude. Mate, don't worry about it.
When you say that, that's how I got to play like the Fire Slayers for ETC. When they, after Six Nations, they were like, you need to play Fire Slayers. I set up my table at home and I was just like, right, how does this work? I just set it up and I just went, right, okay, so everything needs to be here. And then I just pushed it about the table and then I set it up again. And then I put my Stormcast on the other side and I played a game against myself that I could figure out how it worked. And then I played like every time at that point when we were play testing, I was playing against a different army. I was like, can I just use Fire Slayers against it because I need to understand it? Mm-hmm. So I when I was playing against sort of like Kieran Harper or Liam or against it, I was like, right. And it's just you have to. Me and you are similar, as in like you need to understand how the thing works before you get into the game. So that when you're at the table, it's almost autopilot because you understand everything.
That's really important. For me, I think for each player, there's a certain amount of decisions they can make before they get mental burnout. And the quicker you can get your opponent to that point, and the more you can delay that point for yourself, then the more successful you'll be in the late game. And one of the ways you can make sure that you're prepped for decision fatigue is making sure you know what order you're going to put your units down in, where they're going to be in the board, their physical presence. If that's already there and you've practiced it again and again, when you come to the table, you know what you're doing. You can also take that one step further and imagine what's across from you and have a plan, against Seraphon, against KO, against all the big baddies that are out there at the moment, or back in the day, Slanesh, so that you're spending less time having to pay attention to what you're putting on the table. It allows you to put more attention on what your opponent's doing. And you can get so much information in deployment about what their plans are going to be in the future turns that you can then almost try and interrupt them. And that's basically what, and I do that from like a list planning stage, and so that I'm fully prepped, because I know that I'm probably going to be hangover. So I can't be spending too much time concentrating on every little decision. I need to just whack it down, and then my focus will be on my opponent. And then what you want to do, obviously, try and make sure that you're the guy that's asking the questions. I'm a proactive player. I know I'm not particularly good at Age of Sigmar, so my whole gameplay is to make my opponent force mistakes from my opponent that I can then capitalise on, so they don't notice mine. Because if you watch my games, you'll notice they're full of errors. You probably experienced that when you played me, Russ. To be fair, I think you
we to be honest, like, we spoke a lot about with Anthony and sort of across the stream already about being proactive in decisions and analysis paralysis and having, even when we're talking to Richie, he's a very like, I've got my plan, I go and execute my plan. But when he's playing with KO, he's thinking, I have to dictate, I have to be flexible, manoeuvrable and adaptable, and he struggles with that. Whereas it's quite interesting to hear you say that you're trying to avoid decisions because that means that you're able to make better decisions because you're not making 50 of them. You only have to concentrate on the 5 you need to make. And I think that's really important, is to understand when you write a list, are you just complicating yourself out of a victory? It's a bit like when you've got so many synergies and little rules, sometimes it's better to keep it simple.
Yeah.
But if you're able to handle the complex surgical kit that is your list, that's going to give you an advantage over your opponent if it's going to be you being able to ask more questions they can't answer. And I think that's a really important skill to do, in terms of in terms of competitive gaming in any sense, but particularly with Warhammer, because it's almost the more opportunities people have got to make a mistake, right? That's the key to force in the game.
Jump on those mistakes, because it's really important from like a psychological perspective as well. If you can capitalise on the mistake your opponent's made and they know they've made a mistake, then that stresses you out, right? And the more stressed you are, again, the front of your brain shuts down when all those stress hormones flood it, and your mental clarity is no longer there. All my efforts in a game, well, not all of them, because sometimes I'm like everyone else. I still get stressed out with bad dice. I try not to. I try to hide it. But all my focus when I'm in a game, I'm always trying to think to myself, breathe, slow down, calm down, get your head right. Don't show him you're on the ropes. Get that chest up. Do you know what I mean? Make him think that you're seeing something that they don't. And then sometimes you can, and it's all about the late game. It's all about, and you've got to want it as well.
Because we did that with when we talked about earlier. We said that, like, your opponent's perception of your confidence and your demeanor is important. So, like, if you can play in a very assertive way and very quick to make decisions, rather than, they might be bad decisions, but you can kind of exude this, like, well, I know that's going to definitely win, and people will play in a very different way. I mean, one of the games I won at the ETC, I played a Daughters player and he had all the tools to destroy my Slanesh army, but it was obvious that he didn't understand how Slanesh worked, and he castled, and I just obliterated him. And I was like, you could have picked my army to bits with your list, but because he didn't play the game, he was always losing that game. And I was just like, you're
playing to not lose rather than playing to win.
Yeah, but he'd lost the game before he got to the table in the matchup process.
So many people do that. So many people do.
I'd say as well, Darren, like you're one of the things that like, and I don't want to like blow smoke at your ass, but like in that French round in the ETC, when I'd gone to pieces because I just come out of that Swedish game and I was stressed. And I was like, I've got to play this French guy, and I've never beat him. I've played him like multiple times, and you just took me to one side and just was like, right, you know what you're doing. You got real calm and influence, and you did that whole thing about being confident. Don't show your thing. Don't show if you make a mistake. Just be confident and go into the game. And it was just the whole way you approach it when you sort of like took me to one side. It was just like, calm down, chill out, go and do it. You know what you need to do. And it was really good just to have somebody externally go, right, you know what your army does. You know everything that you need to do. Calm down. If you make a mistake, it's not the end of the world.
There's a reason you've been chosen, Liz. You're one of the best players in England. Go kick his ass. And it worked, didn't it?
Yeah, he quit turn 2, but it's but it was still. But yeah, it was just like you're really good. The way you approach it was amazing. What I need is you and Jack just stood behind me for every tournament, and I'll be like, Darren's just motivating me, and Jack's telling me what to do, and then that's all I need to go win games.
I'm not sure that's possible.
He's just like he's a conduit for the excellence. He doesn't actually. But
that's the great thing about team events, though, isn't it? You can all vibe off each other.
Facehammer objective markers are available for pre-order now. Click the link in the description below and order them from Element Games.
But I think that brings on to a good point about your kind of I mean your I don't know if it's intentional, but even your Twitter handle at Positive Victim is kind of sums up probably your state in the fact that you're sort of you're really good at just reframing and getting people sort of into a certain mindset. And I know that like even at the ETC you're really good in the team because you're able to just keep people buzzed and with their tails up and that and give some really good sage advice. And that's really, really powerful. And I know you've been doing a lot of stuff online with like helping people with lists and things like that. So do you want to talk a little bit about that and how you got into doing that? And almost coaching, I guess it is. But
yeah, I mean, I don't. It's not too in depth. Coaching is probably a bit of a strong term, but ever since the South Coast GT when I did well with Seraphon when they were not what they are now. I had many people sort of ask me for advice. You know, all these Seraphon players that were struggling, they wanted to know what you're doing, how you're doing it, etc. And someone introduced me to Lustria Online, and I wrote up some of my battle reports. You know, and I've got lots of feedback from people saying this has been really useful. This has helped me see this, that, and the other. Thank you very much. And I really, really enjoyed that. Helping people is great, isn't it? You know, it's one of the main ways people are happy is to give and to help. So I like to be happy. It's my favourite thing to be. And so I got into that sort of more and more. And then as I guess my success got better, you know, when I made it into the Masters, etc., and sort of won a few events, then people were asking more and more. And at one point I was getting like 3 people asking me questions a day about lists and you know, what do you think of this list, etc. And by the way, we spoke about this earlier, just for people sort of watching, 9 out of 10 people are really terrible at asking for advice. Yeah. It's not enough to just say, what do you give someone a list and then say, what do you think of this list? Because that's not, I could tell you it's a great list or it's a bad list, you know.
Yeah,
and a lot
framed it, have they?
A lot of the time as well, people just want to hear that they've had a good idea. So what I found very early on when I said that I like this but I don't like that, then people would get a bit grumpy and go away. You know, so people are looking for. I think a lot of people are searching for affirmation, aren't they? That they've had a good idea.
Yeah,
it's like positive reinforcement about what they're doing. And
sometimes that's not the. You know, I think if you're going to go ahead and ask for help, then you've got to accept that you might not see things the same way as someone else. which is
Your
fine.
opinion. What is it on this? Oh, it's not great because X or Y. I don't like your opinion anymore.
But so when you're asking for advice, you know, I mean, not just me. If you're asking for anyone, if you've got an idea for a list, then the person you're asking needs to know: are you a proactive player or reactive? Do you get negged out if things don't go your way? So you need to have a consistent list. You know, you're better off with Zinch that don't bother rolling dice, for example.
Just better off with Zinch, full stop, aren't we? That's how it works.
Do you find that you're more focused when you're fighting from behind? So take someone like Chris Myhill, for example. You know, when he's losing, the switch goes and he ends up winning. You know, because he's
the Scrabble, isn't it? It's like he's then hyper like.
Yeah. So are you like that? Do you know all these various things? That's what you need to be then applying to your list, because you need to accentuate your list should accentuate your strengths, not cover your weaknesses. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%. And that's why we talk about, in the past, we've talked about copying someone else's list that they've been successful won't give you success, because it's not written for you, it's written for them. And what you're trying to do is play their game, but you're the one having to do it, and actually your strengths might be totally different, and that list you might find somebody who's similar to you that the list gels with, but generally understanding, it's a bit like Mortal Kombat, it know thyself, and use the element that brings life. No, let's not go down that route. And then, you know, like, do you know what I mean? Like, actually to understand your strengths and weaknesses, to think that actually this plays into my wheelhouse, this is what I do, this suits me. Whereas when you play a list that's someone else might be really good with it, but it's completely alien to how you play Warhammer, you're just going to get frustrated.
Taking storm themes.
Yeah. Or like, you know, even like Les and Hallowheart, you know, like it's not.
Yeah, I should never have took that Hallowheart list. Like, never. It's just not. It's not the way I play Warhammer. I'm like you, Darren. It's almost like I almost don't care what my opponent does on the table. I want to go. I'm going here, and if you don't deal with it, I'm going to kill you. I'm going there. If you don't deal with that, I'm going to kill you there. And then it's like, because I don't want to. I ask the questions. I don't. You know, that's how I like to play Warhammer. I'm like, do that, and I don't always win. I lose a lot of games, but. I'm not one of these people that, like, I don't want to consider what my opponent's doing. I want to ram home my agenda in the game and beat them that way, as opposed to going like, oh, if I move that there, they can go there, and then I'll counter that there. I'm not like that. I'm like, I want to go, I'm going to put 9 eels on the corner of that table, and you're going to go, oh shit, how do I deal with that? And then when you've turned to deal with that, I'm going to put 6 eels on the other side of the table, and then you split your deployment just in time for me to then go and do something else, as opposed to being, I'm a proactive instead of reactive player, and that's why I should never took Hallowheart, because Hallowheart, you move forward to shoot something, and then if it doesn't die, you go,
what if I didn't know any of that, and you'd have just sent me that Hallowheart list and gone, what do you think? Hallowheart list is great. That wouldn't have been very useful advice, would it?
No, exactly.
And people are terrible at asking for advice on the whole.
Yeah. It's being specific with stuff, isn't it, as well? It's like going, Darren, do you think this list is good? I want to compete. I want to go 4-1. I generally love Lizardman, say Seraphon. I want to go 4-1 at an event. Do you think that there is a more balanced list that suits my aggressive play style? Or, you know, that's how I like to play. I'd rather play aggressive. I want to go 4-1 with this army. What do you think? And then, you know, or can you critique that? Now you know that. Can you critique the list and maybe have something that makes it a little bit more balanced? And go like, I'm losing lots of games. I want to go 4-1. I'll probably go in 2 and 3. Is there any tweaks you can make to this core list that I enjoy playing?
Yeah,
to help me go.
It's just about getting your problem statement sorted. So you say, what is the problem you're having? How can you help me solve it? Like, if you don't have a good problem statement and it's just, is this good? Is this nice?
Yeah.
Do we like this?
Yeah, who are you playing? Who are you struggling to get? What missions?
Yeah, if you say, I played this and I had a problem with Y, I thought this would have worked, it turned out it didn't. Was I just unlucky, or should I worry about this in the current meta? And you might say, well, in that situation, actually, you're going to be behind, but actually not many people are playing it, so I won't worry about it. You know?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, definitely. And the moment that, so the reason I do it so much, I think, is I was at Blood Tithe, and I got to no, not Blood. Was it Blood Tithe? What's the
Blood the Shire? Blood the Shire.
No.
Steve Curtis.
No, it's Blood Tithe. It was Blood Tithe. It was a team event, Blood Tithe. It was the first one, and there was a team over from Greece, and I got to. My opponent was a guy called Giannis. I think it's Giannis. Hopefully that's how it's pronounced. Wonderful chap. So I've never seen anyone more smiley and Warhammer than perhaps Dan Ford. You know, his crazy manic art.
Yeah.
But he was the Greece version, the Greek version. He was just wonderful. He's like, Darren, I go on Russia. When I first play Seraphon, I lose all the time. I see your articles. Winning my games. This massive hug, and like just that thought that someone in another country could read what you've done, and it have such a powerful impact on their hobby enjoyment. That's wonderful.
It's now an international team event, very possibly because of seeds you planted, which is damn cool, right?
Yeah. Oh, this just wonderful. Do you want to say? Evie wants to say it. Like, come on then.
Hey.
This is our rescue Evie from remaining question. Yeah. So that was good girl. So that was one of my favourite moments in Warhammer. That was meeting Giannis. And then I want to try and do that as many times as I can, right?
Yeah.
Another thing as well, because a couple of people will say to me, I've had this before, like, why do you try and help people beat you? And the answer to that, you're only as good as the people you play. There's no point being a big fish in a little pond, is there?
No.
When you're practicing and you're playing your friends, and if you're beating them all the time, you're doing
it. You lose every practice game, right? And learn from it, ideally.
Yeah. Well, you should be afterwards. You should be, saying what potentially, because it's difficult telling a grown adult what they did wrong, right? But potentially discussing what could have been done in those various situations. You should be trying to bring everyone up around you, because that gets you better eventually, doesn't it? Yeah. If everyone else around you is better, then you get better, and it drives everyone forward, doesn't it? So that's like
I do it at club games. I played a guy at the club, and it's just like I had Fire Slayers, and he had blades of putrefaction, blades on a unit of plague monks, and charged into my Fire Slayers, with the wall of 30 Hearthguard. And I was like, okay, cool. I spend a command point, I'll go first. And he was like, oh, and I killed all 30 of them. And he was like, right. I was like, so don't take any of your models off. Let's say I don't spend the command point. And he was like, what do you mean? I was like, I'm not going to spend the command point. Don't take your models off. Roll it now. And then he killed 18 Hearthguard Berserkers. And I was like, okay, so that's fine. Carry on playing the game. I then killed them all, then won priority. And I was just like, so if I win priority now, I charge 2 Great and Clean Ones with the remainder of the Hearthguard block. And what you've got left is a unit of Plague Bearers on the back of the board edge. And he's like, yeah. I was like, so I win the game if I kill these Great and Clean Ones and I win priority. He was like, yeah. I was like, so I'll give the priority away because we know what happens there. How do you come back from it? And it's like, that's kind of like how I played games at the club, just because I learned something then. So I know that the Hearthguard Berserkers, common sense really, could take
anything in the game.
30 Plague Monks. Yeah. Anything in the game. 30 Plague Monks with blades on them at the time. And it's when you're in those practice situations, you don't necessarily have to crush your opponent at the club. You can be like, right, well, we know that we've just come here on a Monday night. I've doubled you. I'm going to table you. I'll give the turn away and see what happens if I didn't win, or or let's say that I didn't strike first. I think that's always good to learn when you're playing these sorts of games. I mean, I'm not sure if that's something that you would take into account or do yourself. I mean, I know you play Rick and Chris a lot, don't you? So
we practice a bit differently, I think. So the Bruces. So if I go back to my origin story, I missed out a huge part of that. Obviously, I'm from a gaming group, the Bruces, down in the south coast in Portsmouth, and I'm lucky enough to live 10 minutes away from Chris Myhill, Rick Myhill. There's also Andy Scott that's there. We've got Wayne, Russ, Charlie, lots of Colin, lots of Bruces, and none of them are interested in the metagame. None of them are interested in powerful lists. None of them are interested in the internet. So we live in our own little bubble. When we play games, and we see them as practice games, we throw any old rubbish down. you know.
Yeah.
And what we practice isn't, answering questions that we already know the answers to. What we practice is problem solving, because that's essentially what Age of Sigmar is. And I've been doing that with these guys since my early 20s. So that's nearly 2 decades. God, that is frightening, isn't it? Do you know the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air is 8 years old? I saw that the other day.
What?
How old?
30 years old!
No.
Oh my God.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
So we practice problem solving, and I think that's one of our greatest attributes, is the fact that we can rock up to. I feel really confident that I can rock up to any table, be presented by a brand new situation that I've never come across, but I've had so much practice problem solving that I'm pretty confident the idea that I'll come up with 75% of the time will work. So I think when you're practicing, not only practice those games and go back and give the priority away, etc. But I think that is super useful, seeing what would have happened if you'd have lost the priority or won it, etc. But also, you don't always have to put down your amazing, really honed list. Try and win games with Doomfire Warlocks. Try and win games with Seagulls. Because that's what me and Rick and Chris have been trying to do for sort of 20 years.
Yeah.
And it works. And you also learn a lot about how to get value. So that comes back to practicing sort of list writing as well. What I like to do sometimes is pick a random unit and then try and work out a tactic based on that, and then design a list all around that unit. And I've got no intention of ever using it. It's just the exercise of trying to maximise value sort of out of it, and then have a little chat with someone and see if you can improve it.
It's adding knowledge as well, isn't it? It's like it's stacking up those things that you then know in the gap in the situation. And we talked about it earlier on, where it's like I need to play a lot of games to understand how a thing works. Whereas if you've tried, you understand what your opponent's list does, because you've played all of these quirky different things trying to get value out of it. And that's, I think you can't, that's something that I think I need to do a bit more, is maybe not because I think Kieran Harper and Liam Cook say to me, I never switch off. I'm always playing Tournament Warhammer. I never play for fun. It's always like Tournament Warhammer, and that's it when I play.
Wow, you should definitely play for fun. I always tell myself, one thing that I'm terrible at is losing. I hate losing. I've always hated it. I've always envied the people that can play a game, lose, and enjoy it just as much as they've won it. Because then you win every game, don't you? So that's something that I need to work on. I'm getting slightly better at it. But yeah, you can that competitive mindset. Just try it. Just try using some out there lists against other out there lists, and you'll find that your perspective widens, your peripheral vision widens when you use all sorts. You've got nothing to lose, have you? It's a practice game.
No, exactly. Yeah, exactly. That's something I want to do a bit more often. Hopefully with COVID, if we ever get to see people again in person, I'd like to go to the club and play a few more games. I mean, obviously I'm kind of all in on the Luminef stuff just because it really tickles my fancy. But there's a couple of lists that I want to run that aren't 40 Sentinels with X or that's going to smash you. But it's it's going to.
Well, you might find gold. That's the thing. If you give yourself, if you give yourself blinkers that it's only 40, 50, 60 Sentinels that are any good, then you might miss that beautiful thing that takes you over the edge. Always.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to playing Russ with his slaves list, because Russ is finally delving into the Slaves of Darkness book, which is going to be quite interesting to see what he comes up with. I'm sure you'd be. It's he's Gavin Bellacore and then some stuff, because that's the Slaves army.
I've actually the list. Sorry.
Do you know what you're taking, or is that a secret?
No, I haven't. For me, it's more a hobby thing. So I really like warriors. So I like armored knights, and I've got an old warriors army that I painted, and it was probably the best thing I painted. But I've learned a lot, and there's a lot of new techniques, there's a lot of new models, and I could do it a lot better now. So what I really want to do is reimagine that army. You know, like do it again. So the army will focus around Chaos Knights and Warriors and probably some Untamed Beast. I'm not really in the mood for putting in Marauders, because I just really don't like those miniatures. So yeah, I've actually just done 40 for a commission, so I'm really sick of them now. But basically, yeah, I don't know. Like I haven't gone down the journey yet, and I've written one list with lots of knights and no Be'lakor, and I've written lists with Be'lakor and a Demon Prince and Warriors and a couple of knight units, Untamed Beasts, or I've toyed with, do I take a War Shrine, do I not take a War Shrine? I've looked at the Manticore, I've looked at you know, going for Zinch, going for Khorne, going for Nurgle, mixing in Rotbringer stuff, mixing in Bloodsecrator or Bloodstokers. I mean, there's so many options. It's like it's kind of. I just know that.
Then I was thinking, how many options are there in that book? It's
amazing. Yeah,
I know.
It's like a puzzle box of awesomeness. But I think for me, the biggest thing is I just really like the models, so I just want to play with the models.
Well, that helps, doesn't it, as well?
Yeah, well, it's pretty much everything. Right?
You're going to invest all this time into it, so you may as well take the thing you like, right? So same as you with like you love Seraphon, don't you, Dar? So like, you know, whatever happens, you'll always have you'll always do Seraphon, won't you? Whenever it comes out.
I managed to paint an army.
I know, I saw, mate.
Thanks to contrast paints. Thank God for contrast. I got it done in 3 months. Normally it takes me 6 months to do an army, which is why I borrow some and then get dropped at Facehammer events, livid.
Yeah, we did, didn't we?
Yeah, don't tell me your bin bag for War Scrolls.
I should have been, not that I hold a grudge, but I should have been second when Luke Morton won, and I should have been third. But oh well.
Yeah, but you know that was your own.
I should have painted my model, shouldn't I, Russ?
I think at the South Coast, the worst thing, it was like one base rim you had to paint. One model was based differently. It's like,
oh, I know.
It would have taken you like an hour max.
At the time, I was livid. I was so cross. But now looking back on it, I was just an idiot, wasn't I deserved it. You taught me a lesson, so thank you.
It is difficult, isn't it? No, because like, if you've got
your finished army,
you have to stick to it, don't you? I suppose.
What's that, Byron? I've got a finished army.
I said, well, it could have sponsored your finished army. Now you're like, well, I'm going to do it. Everything's going to be the same, and I'm not going to repeat that scenario ever again.
No, that's true. That is true. But then I did it again. Third time lucky.
It wasn't aimed at you personally. It was just.
No, of course not. Of course not. I don't think that. I didn't
as long
think
as
that.
you don't realise that, it's fine. I mean, don't think that.
Yeah.
So
I had a great.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask you a little bit about, because we talked about like lists and very general sort of conceptually about, being better at the game and what you should do. I mean, what's your kind of when you go to events, do you set yourself little objectives? Do you have is it depending on the event? Is it kind of the mental exercise of I want to make this unit work? I know you've touched on it, but when you're going to a tournament for yourself, what do you kind of do? What's your process for getting prepped and getting your list and army together for an event?
So every event I want to fundamentally at my core win. I hate losing, and I want to pretend that isn't the case. But if I'm honest, that is the truth. I want to win. I want to crush my opponents. I don't
see them driven before you.
That's the ultimate goal. But so how I start that is you need to sort of think to yourself. I think one of the mistakes people make is trying to design a list that's very good in one game. But when you're going to an event, it's got to be good across 5 games. So one of my first principles is I want my list to be as consistent as possible. I want to take as least risks as possible. You know, if I've got a skink priest, for example, and I'm relying on getting that 3+, you know, be able to run and charge and +1 armor save, then I'm going to take 2 because that isn't good. A 3+ isn't good enough for me, right?
No.
I like Kairos. You see Kairos in a lot of my lists because he can just choose to, you know, to cast a spell or stop an unbind. And so I really like his reliability. And obviously his 2 dice pick the highest, and he can pick other people's spells as well. So if you've got a really powerful spell like the Corruptor, him being able to cast it, find, you know, super useful. So a lot of my lists, so I try and make them as consistent as possible. And then I'm always concentrating on games 4 and 5. So my list will be tech, and it will be geared to defeat what I expect to be in those later rounds. Because I've got a positive mental attitude. I'm going to get through the first 3 games, you know, through sheer will and luck. And then if I haven't won one of those 3 games, then I'm just going to chill out for the rest. I mean, I'm still going to try and submarine. I don't like losing, but I'm not going to be so focused.
Yeah.
But if for me to have my best shot, I've got to try and tech for what I think I'm going to be fighting in games 4 and 5. And that'll be, and you can pay attention to what's going on around you, what's going on in the world, and what's being successful. At the moment, you know, you'd need to be good against Seraphon. I don't think you'd necessarily need to be so good against KO. They are quite scary, but I do find that they've got some terrible matchups, haven't they? So I think they're less likely to get 4 and 5 than, say, Seraphon, which will consistently get there. Zinch, obviously, again, they're so consistent. That's why they're there.
Yeah.
And then, so you want to be, and Eels, they've got the most impressive war scroll in the whole game, haven't they? They just do everything. They've got all that intrinsic value in one go. That's why Eels fan lists do so well, because they've got all those rerolls, and they've got all that manoeuvrability, etc. So I want to be designing lists that I think have got a chance against not necessarily hard counters to all those lists, because they probably don't exist, hard counters to those lists now. They're so offensive, aren't they? They're so good, they're so powerful. Yeah. But I just want a chance. And like I say, I'll go into those. Those are the ones that I'll be, when I'm doing my deployments and I'm imagining my first turns, etc. Those are the lists that I'm sort of concerned about. So I will try and take my list will be consistent. Something I can get a hold of as well, because I've got to be able to borrow it, right? So I'm a little bit limited. But I will go out and buy and contrast paint an army if I believe in it. I got the Seraphon one because obviously I like lizards.
Yeah. So have you done that? Gone out and painted this army because you believe in it? Have you done a Seraphon list or
the Sylvaneth, the first one?
Yeah.
That's my first competitive event, and I was the first 3 or 4 games that I'd played, and I was trying to win with Sylvaneth back in the day. I was fannying about with what they called one of the sub factions, the one that teleports. Yeah. The one that
Tree Revenants.
No, it's the sub faction. You now use a command point to teleport them.
Oh, Dreadwood.
Yes, there we go, Dreadwood. So I had that, and I had the formation that was in there, and I was losing my games, and I realised that if I take out that formation and this key piece, I can fit in another 9 hunters, Colonel hunters. Yeah. So that was and I was just like, that's going to win me the event, because it's going to shoot off the Stormcast heroes in those good armies. And also, another thing that I like to have in my list are ways to deal with support heroes. I really like reach. I really like to be able to. I think again, going back to Ben Curry, I think he's seen a couple of my games when I've been at Blood and Glory or played him. He describes my playstyle as surgical. I like to be able to kill little support heroes, as soon as possible. And there's a number of reasons. Firstly, I need little wins throughout the game. I've got a low attention span, and I need to feel like I'm I won't be shooting into a screaming bell because that means I'm going to be killing it 3 turns later. I don't like to do chip damage. I like to kill the warlock because it means something died and that's had an immediate impact on the game. And that's just because I'm a child. Like I need to feel those wins, and I know that about myself. So, but also when you kill support heroes, that means that their units deal less damage and die quicker. Yeah. So my lists will often have a lot of reach or, consistent ways of doing damage. I really like the Prime. I've always liked the Prime. You can come down and just put 3 mortal wounds anywhere. That's just bonkers. It's so good. Yeah. So I like to. So if I'm going to gear up to win an event, it will be geared to be able to target specific heroes within those factions. Hopefully table wide, and hopefully without the least amount of luck involved.
How much emphasis do you put on being able to do that from turn 1, Darren? Like you said, you're impatient and you need your wins throughout the game. Are you way more likely to take something that has a slightly worse poke from the first turn rather than from like turn 3 with loads of setup? How do you approach that type of stuff?
I will definitely always I want to be impacting turn 1. That's why a lot of my lists have Umbral Spell Portal. I don't like it. The thought of wasted turns. If you've got an army that's got no reach, you don't have Spell Portal. You're just moving about in the first turn. That's a bit boring, isn't it? But also, you can't affect your opponent's deployment. You want to be getting in their heads from the off. You want to be able to them to know that you've got a spell portal and you can put your spell anywhere. Where am I going to put my heroes? How can I defend against that? You're asking questions without doing anything. They're just looking at your list and they're already up and right.
And that's why I think it's important to have something like with reach, like you've got your Slaves to Darkness teleport spell. It just means that they have to think about that, even if you're not going to cast it. But they don't know you're not going to cast it or that you're not going to get it off.
If they don't think about it, you're in. Rick's got a lot of success with his Lord on Carcatrak. How do you pronounce that? Carcatrak?
I like to say Crackerjack, like the. But it's not how you pronounce it. But I'll be picked up on it because I seem to pronounce a lot of things incorrectly. So I say Carcatrak, but he's a model that I want to utilize in my army because I really like the model. And I think it's.
Well, a lot of people will be thinking about where's that big marauder block going to teleport, but they're not thinking about that little chap that can get in behind people. So you can take advantage of people's mistakes in deployment as well. Yeah. If you've got no way to reach out and touch them, you can't take advantage of any of their mistakes. And I need to be taking advantage of people's mistakes because I make so many of my own. I try and force more mistakes than I make. So yes, Byron, I look to be, and I've said I'm proactive. So I want to be affecting them in deployment and in the first turn. Absolutely. So a lot of my lists have got a lot of reach because of that.
Yeah, it's one of the things I used to love about.
Sorry.
Sorry, as I say, it's one of the reasons why I like Stormcast so much is the ability to drop that comet down, and that coupled with the Prime, or even like again, I like wax lyrical about Skyborn Slayers because I put 2 models on the table and go right deploy, and then everyone just seems to go, hang on, what? Like, how am I going to deploy when he can be 5 inches in front of me on the first turn if he wants? And then like if you've got the comet as well, the amount of times that people just don't, like I'll look at people deploy and I'll just go like, I fit the comet there, I hit all of their heroes on the turn, and then if I do it, like if I go second and then win the priority 1 into 2, then it blows up again, I kill all the support heroes.
Yeah.
And it's like they only get caught out with it once and then they go, oh god, and then they just spread all their support heroes out, which is then also a win for you because you're like, well, you're not buffing everything there because you're scattered across the table.
Well, you're then free to focus on a flank, aren't you? And then sort of move yourself. I like win-win situations. That's a win-win situation, is it? They either cramp up and buggered, or they split apart and they're buggered. That's what your list should be doing, putting you in win-win situations. And you can.
It's the same.
Me off.
it's the same with like when people are going to play against Teclis now. I think with the Lumineth, it's like Teclis is going to drop that spell through the spell portal, and it's going to hit everything in your army. So you either have to accept the fact that you're going to take D3 mortal wounds off 90% of the things in your army, or you try and spread out. But it's the fact that it's such a massive area of coverage that you can't do it. So it's almost like I'm just going to bunch up and take it because I can't affect it anyway. I mean, that's kind of like, but it also makes your opponent think then in deployment. Like, you know, there's nothing worse than that's the thing I hate when I'm playing against somebody and they've got an army that makes me change the way I deploy, or fundamentally how I want to deploy.
That's what you want.
Yeah.
That's what you want to be doing all the time, because people aren't great at making stuff up on the spot.
No,
so
it's like, I want to deploy in a castle, and that's where I do it. And that's, you know, and then if someone goes, well, I'm going to do this thing that stops you doing that, I'm like, well, I either have to take what they're going to do, or I have to just separate out, which then means that I'm on the back foot from turn one.
Another thing I find really, you know, quite poignant is you can explain what everything does. People can know what it does, but, you know, reading about something, seeing it, and then but actually experiencing it are two different things. And it's only through that experience of just how bad, you know, how many mortal wounds Croak can pump out, how bad Prime is when he comes down, or half guard.
It's like when me and you played Blood and Glory, didn't you? And I kind of figured out, I knew we were playing, what was it, 3 Places of Power on the stream, Blood and Glory that year, and I was hungover. And it was, I kind of, you had the sort of like, you know, the scissors to my paper, because I had like the Stormcast and you had all these mortal wounds. And like, in my head, I was like, I knew that you kill all my heroes on the first turn, but I didn't quite expect quite how efficiently it just did it. It was just like, oh, so you need to play it, don't you, sometimes to see it.
And that was when I was rolling poorly as well, because I rolled a double blooming one twice in that hero phase.
I know. That was such a fun game, though.
But I didn't tell you it was sinking.
No.
Yeah,
It was such a good game. At one point, I thought I was going to win as well. I was like, right, I think I've got this. It's when I left Croak on like 1 wound or something. I was just like, oh, no.
Yeah, he was a hero. But again, if I'd have deployed badly in that, so that game plan, Les, you know, I knew what I was doing, because that army's quite famous, right? So I already knew that I was deploying in a corner and then moving my Shadow Strike Skinks up so your Judicators couldn't come down and shoot Croak. Do you know what I mean? I already knew that. So when I was deploying, I wasn't thinking about it. I already knew what I was doing. And that allowed me to pay more attention to what you were doing. And then you notice the whole plan was, you know, I teleported to there, surrounded here, and the whole plan was to hold these for a couple of turns and you could kill all your heroes and then you couldn't win. And I already had that plan in place weeks before I even knew I was playing it. You know, that's probably the perfect highlight of, you know, how prepared you can be for a certain matchup.
Yeah,
you know, might be because that was a popular build, wasn't it? And well done.
Yeah, it was. Thank you. I'd like to say it's just my work, but it wasn't. But I just played it a lot. It's like Rusty and Cook and me, sort of like bouncing ideas off each other, and then I'd take an idea, run with it, claim it as my own. That's what I do.
No ideas are purely one person. We all chat to each other.
No, I don't.
Don't give credit to everyone else, because we've all got egos.
Yeah.
Don't know what you're talking about.
All narcissists are. Yeah. If it's not about us, we don't care.
So I think it's been a really interesting discussion. I know we could talk about Warhammer for like 10 hours if we were allowed to. We do have Sean coming on in about half an hour, so I'm conscious that we're no, it's fine. You're on 1 hour, so it's fine. This 1 hour.
Dude, like it's been good. Hopefully, everyone's enjoyed the content, because you've been like so compelling to listen to, Darren. I love our little chats.
Thank you. You love me, don't you, Les? We should get married.
A little bit.
We all love you, but not that much. So yeah. But I think it's thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Giving us an insight into your sort of method behind your play, and it's interesting. So thanks very much for your time.
Stuff for people to learn from it.
Do you want to plug yourself, Dar, as well? Because like obviously there's some people watching and stuff. Like, plug yourself up.
I do a list show with Rob on the Honest War Gamer. We try and do it once a month. I've not done management in a little while because he's been getting geared up for the T Sport Super Series, which I took part in last weekend and is fantastic. Absolutely thoroughly loved it. You can see me. You can if you've got any questions you'd like to ask me, you're more than welcome to. I'm Positive Victim on Twitter. You can message me there. Sometimes I don't always get back to you straight away because my DMs are normally chocker. I do my very best. And I do a list show, and if you do listen to that and you've got any feedback for me, I'd love it, because I'd like to. I think if you're doing a show like that, it's all about communication.
Yeah.
And I'd like to get better at it. I don't think I'm particularly good at this, so I would like to. Feedback on that would be much appreciated.
Well, I'd say post your links to your stuff in the general chat, and we'll make sure they're in the show description when we put this on YouTube.
Yeah, absolutely, dude.
Plug you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right.
No, thanks for being on, Darren.
Yeah, thanks very much, and we'll talk to you soon.